Hobart's Funnies. Everything you are about to hear is completely real and based on verified historical events. This story is documented through British War Office records, Churchill's personal correspondence, engineering blueprints, veteran testimonies, and after-action reports from the D-Day landings. Every person mentioned existed. Every tank design is documented. Every strategic decision is verified historical fact. The images and video footage you see throughout this documentary have been generated using artificial intelligence for illustrative purposes only. To help visualize these extraordinary actual events that transformed the deadliest day of World War II into an Allied victory. June 6, 1944, 0630 hours, Omaha Beach, Normandy. American soldiers were dying by the hundreds. German machine guns swept the beach from concrete bunkers that seemed indestructible. Mortar fire fell like rain. Artillery shells churned the sand into a moonscape of craters and corpses. Men drowned in 3 feet of water weighed down by equipment. Those who reached the beach found themselves trapped against a seawall with nowhere to go. The invasion that was supposed to liberate Europe was turning into a massacre. Omaha Beach was failing. 6 miles east, a different story was unfolding on Gold and Sword beaches where British forces were landing. Yes, there was resistance. Yes, men were dying, but the British weren't trapped. They weren't pinned down and slaughtered. They were advancing. The difference wasn't courage or training or numbers. The difference was tanks. Not ordinary tanks, but specialized armored vehicles that seemed to have been designed by a madman. Tanks that swam through the ocean like boats. Tanks that laid their own roads across soft sand. Tanks that threw bridges over anti-tank ditches. Tanks that cleared minefields by beating the ground with chains. Tanks that shot 30-pound projectiles that shattered concrete bunkers. These machines looked ridiculous. They'd been mocked by conventional officers. But on D-Day, they saved thousands of lives and proved that the man who designed them was a genius. That man was Major General Percy Hobart. And by all rights, he shouldn't have been anywhere near the D-Day invasion because the British Army had fired him 3 years earlier for being too difficult, too unconventional, too willing to challenge the established ways of doing things. Hobart's military career should have ended in disgrace in 1940. Instead, thanks to Winston Churchill's personal intervention, Hobart got a second chance to revolutionize armored warfare. What he created with that second chance changed military history and saved the Normandy invasion from catastrophe. Percy Hobart was born in 1885 in India, where his father served in the British Indian Army. He grew up in a military culture that valued tradition, hierarchy, and doing things the proper way. Young Percy absorbed those values completely. He attended the Royal Military Academy, Woolwich, and was commissioned into the Royal Engineers in 1904 at age 19. He seemed destined for a conventional, respectable military career as a competent but unremarkable officer. Then he discovered tanks. The First World War introduced mechanized warfare. Tanks appeared on the Western Front in 1916, slow, unreliable machines that broke down constantly and terrified crews who operated them. Most military officers saw tanks as interesting novelties, useful for supporting infantry but not capable of independent operations. Percy Hobart saw something different. He saw the future. After the war, Hobart transferred to the newly formed Royal Tank Corps and spent the 1920s studying tank warfare with the intensity of a religious convert. He read everything. He conducted exercises. He experimented with tactics. He became convinced that tanks properly employed could revolutionize warfare, that armored formations operating independently could achieve strategic objectives impossible for traditional infantry and cavalry. By the 1930s, Hobart was recognized as one of Britain's leading tank warfare theorists. He commanded the Tank Brigade in 1934 and transformed it into a highly mobile, aggressive force that emphasized speed and maneuver over static defense. He was brilliant, everyone acknowledged that. He was also difficult. Hobart had no patience for officers who didn't understand armored warfare. He argued constantly with superiors who wanted tanks used in traditional supporting roles. He pushed his men hard, demanding levels of training and performance that exhausted them. He made enemies among the senior officers who controlled promotions and assignments. In 1938, Hobart was sent to Egypt to create and command the Mobile Division Egypt, later renamed the 7th Armored Division, which would become famous as the Desert Rats. This was exactly the kind of assignment Hobart wanted, a chance to build an armored force from scratch according to his theories. He trained his division relentlessly in the Egyptian desert, pushing men and machines to their limits, developing tactics for desert warfare that emphasized mobility, surprise, and aggressive action. The 7th Armored Division became one of the most effective fighting forces in the British Army. But Hobart's abrasive personality finally caught up with him. He clashed repeatedly with his superior, General Archibald Wavell, over tactics and training methods. Hobart wanted to push harder, train longer, take more risks. Wavell thought Hobart was exhausting the division for no good reason. The conflict escalated. In 1939, Wavell recommended that Hobart be relieved of command and sent home. The War Office agreed. Hobart returned to Britain in disgrace, his career apparently over. The timing was catastrophic. Britain entered World War II in September 1939, desperately needing experienced armored commanders. Hobart, one of the most knowledgeable tank warfare experts in the British Army, was unemployed. He applied for new assignments. He offered his services. The War Office rejected him. Too difficult, too controversial, not a team player. At age 55, Percy Hobart joined the Home Guard as a corporal, the lowest rank, directing traffic and guarding checkpoints in the English countryside, while the war he'd prepared for his entire career raged without him. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister in May 1940. Churchill had his own history of being considered difficult and unconventional. He'd been pushed out of government in the 1930s for his warnings about German rearmament that proved correct but were politically unpopular. Churchill understood that sometimes the difficult, abrasive people were difficult because they were right and everyone else was wrong. When Churchill learned that Percy Hobart, one of Britain's most innovative tank commanders, was serving as a corporal in the Home Guard, he was furious. Churchill wrote directly to the Secretary of State for War in October 1940, demanding to know why Hobart wasn't being employed. The response was bureaucratic evasion about Hobart being difficult and not fitting in. Churchill cut through the nonsense. His response was characteristically blunt. "I have carefully read your minute and have seen some of the papers you showed me. I am not at all impressed by the prejudices against this officer. Such prejudices attach frequently to persons of strong personality and original view." Churchill ordered Hobart reinstated immediately with appropriate command. The War Office complied, though clearly reluctantly. Hobart was promoted back to Major General and given command of the 11th Armored Division, then forming. At age 56, Hobart had been rescued from oblivion and given another chance. He wouldn't waste it. He trained the 11th Armored with the same intensity that had gotten him fired before, pushing men and equipment to extremes, demanding perfection, tolerating no excuses. The division became highly effective. though Hobart continued making enemies among conventional officers who found his methods excessive. But it was Hobart's next assignment that would make him legendary. In March 1943, General Bernard Montgomery, who was planning the eventual invasion of France, recognized that landing on heavily defended beaches would require specialized armored vehicles beyond standard tanks. The beaches would be swept by artillery, studded with obstacles, defended by concrete fortifications, and possibly flooded or marshy. Normal tanks would be destroyed before reaching German positions or would bog down uselessly in sand and water. Montgomery needed someone who could solve these problems, someone unconventional enough to think beyond traditional tank design. He needed Percy Hobart. Hobart was given command of the 79th Armored Division and an extraordinary brief. Develop specialized armored vehicles for the invasion. Whatever you need, whatever it takes, solve the problems that will kill the invasion if not addressed. Hobart assembled a team of engineers and tank crews and began one of the most creative periods of military innovation in history. What emerged from this process were vehicles so strange that conventional officers couldn't believe they'd work. History would call them Hobart's Funnies. The first problem was getting tanks onto the beaches at all. Tanks loaded onto landing craft would be exposed to German artillery while approaching shore. Many landing craft would be sunk before reaching the beach. Even if they made it, tanks would have to disembark in deep water and might flood their engines. Hobart's solution was breathtakingly audacious. Make the tanks swim. Build flotation devices that would turn a 30-ton tank into a boat. The idea seemed insane, but it worked. The DD tank, which stood for duplex drive, was a standard Sherman tank fitted with a collapsible canvas screen that rose around the hull, creating a boat-like shape. Propellers powered by the tank's engine provided thrust through water. The flotation screen could be collapsed in 90 seconds once the tank reached shore, instantly transforming it from boat back to tank. Testing showed that DD tanks could be launched from landing craft 2,000 yards offshore and swim to the beach under their own power. German defenders wouldn't see them coming until they emerged from the waves, already firing. The swimming tanks looked absolutely ridiculous. The canvas screens made them resemble floating bathtubs. Tank crews were terrified of them, convinced they'd sink and drown. Conventional officers mocked them as typical Hobart nonsense, but on D-Day, DD tanks worked. British beaches received swimming tank support. American beaches, where DD tanks were launched too far from shore in rough seas and many sank, didn't receive this support. The difference was evident in casualty rates. The second problem was beach obstacles. The Germans had constructed elaborate underwater and beach obstacles designed to destroy landing craft and block tank movement. Wooden stakes, steel hedgehogs, Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, mines everywhere. Hobart's solution was a tank that cleared its own path using brute force. The Sherman Crab was fitted with a rotating cylinder mounted on arms in front of the tank. The cylinder had 43 chains attached. As it rotated, the chains beat the ground, detonating mines and clearing a path. The Crab could clear a lane through a minefield at 1.5 miles per hour, fast enough to keep pace with an advancing infantry attack. The mine flail looked comically absurd. Crews called it the Crab because the rotating chains resembled waving claws, but it worked with terrifying effectiveness. Crabs cleared thousands of mines on D-Day and afterward, creating safe paths through minefields that would have stopped the advance. Crabs saved countless lives by detonating mines before men stepped on them. The strange appearance didn't matter. Function trumped aesthetics. The third problem was German fortifications. The Atlantic Wall included thousands of concrete bunkers and pillboxes immune to standard tank guns. Infantry attacking these positions would be slaughtered. Artillery bombardment had proven ineffective against reinforced concrete. Hobart needed a weapon that could demolish concrete bunkers at close range. His engineers created the AVRE, the Armored Vehicle Royal Engineers, based on the Churchill tank chassis. The AVRE mounted a petard, a demolition mortar that fired a 40-pound projectile called a flying dustbin. The enormous hollow charge bomb could shatter reinforced concrete at ranges up to 80 yards. AVREs could drive directly up to bunkers and blast them into rubble. The vehicle also carried fascines, enormous bundles of wood and brush that could be dropped into anti-tank ditches to create instant bridges. AVREs could carry assault bridges, place them across gaps, and create paths for following vehicles. Each AVRE was essentially a mobile engineering workshop designed to overcome whatever obstacles the Germans had constructed. The AVRE's petard was so powerful and had such short range that firing it felt like controlled insanity. The massive projectile arc through the air like a garbage can, hit with enough force to demolish buildings. Crews learned to respect the weapon's power while appreciating its effectiveness. On D-Day, AVREs systematically destroyed German strongpoints that would have required days of conventional assault to overcome. The fourth problem was soft sand. Beach sand, especially when wet, couldn't support the weight of heavy vehicles. Tanks would sink, bog down, become immobile targets. Hobart's solution was elegant: make the tank lay its own road. The bobbin was a Churchill tank that carried an enormous reel of canvas carpet reinforced with metal. The canvas could be unrolled in front of the advancing tank, creating an instant roadway that distributed the vehicle's weight and prevented sinking. Following vehicles could use the same carpet road. The bobbin looked like something from a cartoon, a tank with a giant spool of fabric. But on D-Day, bobbins laid yards of instant road across soft sand, allowing vehicles to reach solid ground without bogging down. The concept was so simple it seemed obvious in retrospect, but nobody had thought of it before Hobart's engineers. The fifth major innovation was the crocodile, a Churchill tank towing a two-wheeled armored trailer containing 400 gallons of flame-throwing fuel. A flame projector replaced the tank's machine gun, capable of shooting burning fuel up to 120 yards. The psychological effect of the crocodile was devastating. German soldiers who would fight to the death against conventional weapons surrendered immediately when facing flame weapons. The crocodile was terror made mechanical. Beyond these major types, Hobart's division developed numerous smaller innovations. Tanks fitted with fascines for crossing ditches, tanks with bulldozer blades for clearing obstacles, tanks carrying assault bridges, tanks with searchlights for night operations. Each specialized vehicle solved a specific problem that would otherwise cost lives. Hobart's genius was recognizing that the invasion required not one superweapon, but dozens of specialized tools, each designed for particular challenges. The development process was intensely practical. Hobart's engineers would identify a problem, design a solution, build a prototype, test it, modify it based on results, and test again until it worked reliably. There was no time for lengthy procurement processes or committee approvals. If something worked, it was built and deployed. If it didn't work, it was scrapped immediately and they tried something else. This rapid iteration was possible only because Hobart had Churchill's backing and could ignore normal bureaucratic procedures. Training the crews for these specialized vehicles required new techniques. Tank crews had to learn not just how to fight, but how to swim in DD tanks, how to operate mine flails without blowing themselves up, how to fire petards accurately, how to deploy bridges under fire. Hobart drove his men hard, insisting on realistic training under simulated combat conditions. Crews practiced at night, in bad weather, under smoke and noise designed to replicate battlefield chaos. Some men broke under the training. Those who completed it gained confidence that their unusual machines would actually work when needed. American forces were offered Hobart's specialized armor for their D-Day beaches. General Omar Bradley, commanding American ground forces, accepted the DD swimming tanks but rejected most of the other specialized vehicles. American doctrine emphasized using standard equipment and infantry tactics rather than specialized machinery. This decision would have fatal consequences on Omaha Beach, where American forces without specialized armor support suffered casualties far exceeding British beaches that had full access to Hobart's Funnies. The night before D-Day, Hobart visited his units as they prepared for the invasion. These crews would be among the first to land, clearing paths for the infantry behind them. Their survival chances were poor. Hobart spoke to his men with uncharacteristic emotion, telling them that what they'd trained for would save thousands of lives. Their strange machines would prove the skeptics wrong. He believed in them and in the equipment they'd mastered. At 06:30 on June 6, 1944, Hobart's Funnies hit the beaches. DD tanks swam ashore, emerging from the waves to engage German bunkers before the infantry arrived. Crabs flailed paths through minefields, the chains beating sand and detonating mines in devastating sequence. AVREs blasted concrete bunkers with petards, reducing fortifications to rubble. Bobbins laid roads across soft sand. Crocodiles incinerated defensive positions. The specialized armor performed exactly as Hobart had designed it to. On Gold Beach, the assault moved inland quickly. German defenders, expecting ours to break up the landing, instead faced armored vehicles coming ashore swimming, clearing mines, destroying bunkers, and creating paths for following troops. The psychological shock was immense. Within hours, British forces had established a secure beachhead and were pushing inland. Casualties were significant but far lower than predicted. On Sword Beach, the story was similar. Specialized armor led the assault, methodically destroying obstacles and fortifications. The advance maintained momentum that prevented German counterattacks from forming effectively. By midday, British forces were consolidating positions several miles inland. On Juneau Beach, where Canadian forces landed, Hobart's vehicles again proved decisive. The Germans had flooded areas behind the beach, creating water obstacles that would have trapped infantry. AVREs deployed bridges. Bobbins created roads. The advance continued despite obstacles designed to stop it. On Omaha Beach, where American forces landed with minimal specialized armor support, the difference was catastrophic. Without swimming tanks providing immediate fire support, without crabs clearing mines, without AVREs destroying bunkers, American infantry had to accomplish these tasks under fire using conventional weapons and tactics. It took most of the day to secure Omaha Beach at horrific cost. Over 2,000 American casualties on Omaha Beach compared to roughly 600 British casualties on Gold Beach. The discrepancy was partly due to Omaha's stronger defenses, but largely due to the absence of specialized armor. After D-Day, Hobart's vehicles continued proving their worth. As Allied forces pushed inland, they encountered different obstacles. Normandy's bocage country, with its dense hedgerows, created natural tank barriers. Sherman tanks equipped with Cullen hedgerow cutters, developed from Hobart's modification concepts, could cut through hedgerows and maintain offensive momentum. German forces constructed increasingly desperate defenses. Hobart's vehicles systematically dismantled them. The specialized armor's success vindicated Hobart's career-long argument that tanks properly designed and employed could solve problems conventional forces couldn't address. Critics who'd mocked the Funnies admitted they'd been wrong. The vehicles that looked ridiculous had saved the invasion and thousands of lives. Hobart's unconventional thinking, the quality that had gotten him fired, had proven essential. Post-war analysis confirmed the specialized armor's impact. British and Canadian beaches achieved objectives faster and with lower casualties than American beaches. The primary difference was Hobart's vehicles. Military historians studying D-Day universally acknowledge that the specialized armor was critical to Allied success. Some argue that without Hobart's innovations, the invasion might have failed entirely, or at minimum would have been so costly that subsequent operations would have been compromised. Percy Hobart continued serving after D-Day, though his specialized division was gradually reduced as the need for beach assault equipment diminished. He retired in 1946 at age 61 with the rank of Major General. He'd vindicated his theories, proven his worth, and created innovations that influenced armor design for decades. He lived until 1957, dying at age 72, having seen his contributions recognized and celebrated. The 79th Armored Division's battle honors included the Normandy landings, the crossing of the Rhine, and numerous operations across northwest Europe. The division's motto was swift and sure, but unofficially they were known as the Funnies, Hobart's Funnies, a nickname that started as mockery but became a badge of honor. Veterans of the division wore it proudly, knowing they'd crewed the strange machines that won D-Day. The specialized vehicles themselves had varied fates. Many were destroyed in combat or scrapped after the war. Some survived and are preserved in museums. The Tank Museum in Bovington, England, displays several examples of Hobart's designs. Visitors can see the DD tank with its flotation screen, the Crab with its mine-flailing chains, the AVRE with its petard mortar. These machines look as strange today as they did in 1944, but their presence in museums testifies to their effectiveness and historical importance. The lessons from Hobart's career extend beyond tank design. His story demonstrates that innovation often comes from difficult people, that unconventional thinkers solve problems conventional wisdom can't address, that organizations that fire people for being difficult may be eliminating their most valuable members. The British Army fired Hobart for the same qualities that made him indispensable. Only Churchill's intervention prevented that mistake from becoming permanent. The contrast between Hobart's treatment and his contributions raises uncomfortable questions about military bureaucracy and institutional culture. How many other talented officers were sidelined for being difficult? How many innovations were prevented by adherence to conventional thinking? How much did institutional resistance to change cost in lives and strategic effectiveness? These questions don't have satisfying answers, but are worth contemplating. Churchill's role deserves emphasis. Without his personal intervention, Hobart would have spent the war as a corporal directing traffic. The specialized armor wouldn't have been developed. D-Day casualties would have been higher. The invasion might have failed. Churchill's willingness to override the military establishment and reinstate a difficult, controversial officer had strategic consequences that saved thousands of lives. Leadership sometimes means overruling the consensus. The American decision to reject most of Hobart's specialized armor remains controversial. Some historians argue Bradley made a reasonable decision based on American doctrine and confidence in their forces. Others argue it was a catastrophic error driven by institutional pride and unwillingness to adopt British innovations. What's indisputable is that American beaches suffered higher casualties than British beaches, and the primary difference was specialized armor. Whether those casualties could have been avoided is a question that haunts D-Day scholarship. The technical innovations Hobart's division developed influenced post-war armor development. The concept of specialized vehicles for specific tasks became standard military practice. Combat engineers adopted many of Hobart's solutions. Modern militaries operate mine-clearing vehicles descended from the Crab, bridge-laying vehicles descended from the AVRE, and amphibious vehicles descended from the DD tank. Hobart's innovations weren't one-off solutions, but foundational concepts that shaped armored warfare permanently. The psychological aspect of the specialized armor was as important as the physical. German defenders prepared to face infantry and standard tanks. Instead, they encountered swimming tanks, mine-flailing monsters, bunker-busting demolition vehicles, and flame-throwing terror weapons. The shock value disrupted German defensive plans and created confusion that Allied forces exploited. Psychological warfare through unexpected capabilities multiplied the specialized armor's effectiveness beyond its physical impact. If this story of how one difficult general's unconventional ideas saved D-Day and changed armored warfare forever has fascinated you, if you want to discover more true stories of military innovation, genius under pressure, and the individuals who changed World War II through brilliance and determination, then subscribe to WW2 War Rewind right now. We're rewinding history every day to bring you the documented stories of real people whose unconventional thinking and refusal to accept conventional wisdom shaped the war and changed the world. Tomorrow brings another verified story of innovation, courage, and the moment when everything changed because someone refused to do things the way they'd always been done. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the stories that prove genius is often difficult. Innovation is usually mocked, and the people who save history are frequently the ones everyone wanted to fire.